Thank you, Lynn. Notice he didn't say anything about my speaking capabilities. Hey, I know I'm the only one standing between you and happy hour. But if you give me 20 minutes, I hope you will find it worthwhile. If not, drink tickets are on me. So it was March 28th, 2021, and I was lying on my back looking up at a beautiful blue sky, and going over my head how I'd gotten in this position. I've been riding my bicycle down Plank Road, one of the beautiful country roads that surround our home in Charlottesville, Virginia. Not sure what caused my minor lapse of concentration. May have been looking at my mirror too long, or maybe it was a squirrel. But I let my wheels slide off the edge of the road, just 2 or 3 inches onto the shoulder. Before I could get back up on the asphalt, I hit the trunk of a downed tree. I remember flying, just like Superman, over the handlebars. Now, I was a diver in college, so ducking my head to flip over and land on my back was natural to me. But this time I was too low, and there wasn't any water down there. I remember the crown of my helmet slammed into the ground, and my neck muscles strained as they pulled my body and my bicycle over on the top. Now, I landed on my back, but it's as if somebody had flipped a switch in my neck, because I couldn't move and I couldn't feel anything. So I was lying there next to the road looking up at the sky, wondering how long it would be before a car came along. Now, I had no doubt someone would stop for me. I was lying right beside the road. It was full view of any passerby. And it was an eternity. Actually, it was only about 5 minutes. But I heard a car coming. And I watched as it passed right by me. 5 minutes later, I heard another car. And I watched as it passed right by me. And so did the third. So I've been an athlete and an adventurer all my life. I've played rugby in a dozen states and 3 other countries. I've summited Mount Rainier. I've rafted the Grand Canyon. I've helicopter skied in British Columbia. So I've had some close calls before. And I've learned not to panic. When I was heli-skiing, I got hit by an avalanche. Took my legs out from under me, took me right down the slope, and buried me up to my waist. So I wasn't panicking as I lay there next to the road, but I was getting a little bit concerned. Probably let out a few "oh gods" and didn't turn off my phone. My apologies. So I probably let out a few "oh gods," but what I remember was that the lyrics of a Vampire Weekend song kept going through my head. I don't want to live like this, but I don't want to die. After 20 minutes, my Good Samaritan arrived. I saw a car stop on the other side of the road and a man get out. He looked more scared than I was. Pretty sure he thought I was dead because I couldn't move. So I croak out a "help me," and he hurries across the street and looks down at me and says, "What should I do?" Then I look at him and said, not without some sarcasm, "Why don't you call 911? The man made the call, knelt down beside me, told me his name was Bo, that he was a pastor. So the North Garden Fire Department was only about 3 miles down the road. And the fire chief arrived 5 minutes after the 911 call. The rest of the rescue squad arrived very shortly after that. And as the EMTs were stabilizing my neck and pulling branches and limbs out from under my body, I could see the fire chief on his phone, and I heard him say, "It appears to be a spinal cord injury. And I rolled my eyes up at him and I said, "You think?" Bo stayed with me until they loaded me into the ambulance. Thank God for people like Bo. I wish I knew where he was so I could thank him properly. While I was in the ambulance, the EMTs let me call my wife, Linda. I told her I'd had a bicycle accident and she needed to meet us at the University of Virginia University Hospital. I tried telling her I was fine without telling her that the EMT had to hold my phone for me because I couldn't move. When we arrived at the hospital, I went through a battery of tests, x-rays, scans. Turns out that I suffered a serious incomplete cervical spinal cord injury at the C3, C4 level. Now I can see everybody knows exactly what that means. It's really just medical speak for what the Veterans Administration categorizes as a catastrophic injury. Now the good news was I didn't have any fractures. I could speak, swallow, and breathe normally. The bad news, central cord syndrome is a serious injury, and no one can tell me how much motion I might regain. Now there was some good progress the first couple of days when I was in ICU, which led my neurosurgeon, Dr. Yin, to exclaim, "You are very lucky. I mean, for being so unlucky, you are very lucky." So let's try something. I want everybody to raise your hand as high as you can. Good. Now raise it higher. Whoa, you put your hands down. Did everybody see that? I mean, I thought you'd done your best. The point is, we often think we've done our best. We often think we've done our best, but when we're challenged, we find a way to do it better. When I was growing up, my dad would ask me when the report cards came out, or maybe a test score, he'd say, "Did you do your best?" Now, being a kid, I'd say, "Well, yes, duh." Right. As I've grown older, I've realized that best, while it may sound like an absolute, really isn't. If I'd been completely honest with my father, I would have said, "Well, bless you." I would have said that too. I would have said, "Well, if I hadn't gone out to play for a couple hours and studied instead, I probably would have made a better grade." So following the accident, I spent 8 days in the ICU, and then was transferred to Sheltering Arms Institute, a rehabilitation hospital in Richmond, Virginia. It was here I spent the month of April, being pushed, cajoled, threatened, motivated through intense physical and occupational therapy. Now, when I was there, my therapist would sometimes ask me if I'd done my best, and there were times when I would say yes and be totally truthful about it. As an athlete, being on my knees with a harness holding 50 pounds or more of my weight up and still not being able to do a push-up was a very humbling experience. But that was the best face plant I could do nearly 2 weeks after the accident. I have 3 incredible daughters. And when they were growing up, if they complained or whined, "Daddy, I can't do it," no matter what it was, dribbling soccer balls through some cones or solving a quadratic equation, I didn't ask her if she did her best, because by then I knew that question was almost impossible to answer truthfully. I said, "Okay, but you have to finish your sentence." She'd roll her eyes at me, say, "Daddy, I can't do it yet." When I was dealing with my paralysis in the ICU, that little technique came roaring back to me with a vengeance. Or in the case of my youngest daughter, Christine, there might have been some revengeance. Because of COVID, I could only have 2 visitors. Linda, of course, was one of them. And Christine, who happened to be visiting us when I had my accident, got permission to work remotely so that she could be the other. It was the first day in the ICU. I said, Christine, can you scratch my nose for me because I can't? She calmly looked up from her book and said, I'll help you if you finish your sentence. Okay, I can't scratch my nose yet. There are a lot of powerful words in the English language, but there's only one that I'm aware of that conveys possibility, motivation, and hope in just 3 letters. One little word that changes your perspective. Don't forget the yet. Yet is possibility. The possibility in yet is an affirmation of your current capabilities. When I would tell my daughter, you have to finish your sentence, it was also telling her that I understood there was a difficult task in front of her. And I understood that it possibly could be outside of her current capabilities, but that it was possible and that I expected her to keep trying. So a spinal cord injury is nearly impossible to predict. So no one on my medical team could tell me when or even if I'd be able to pick my, scratch my nose. Feed myself or walk unassisted. It was always, well, you should be able to do that. In time, maybe. As feeling and movement began to return, I had to relearn how to do almost everything. Not just the fine motor skills like tying my shoes. I had to relearn how to sit.
You're wiggling around and stuff, but you're not like a little model. Wow, your posture looks better from here. I don't know. Nice. Can you spread your feet out?
And how to stand.
1, 2, and 3. Ooh, you know, already popped up today. Get those hips under you.
And how to walk.
You gotta look happy, Lee. Oh, look at that wave, too. You can wave with that hand.
And through it all, I had to remember to finish my sentence. Yet is possibility. Don't forget the yet. Yet is motivation. An affirmation of your current shortcomings is also motivation to take on a challenge. When I would tell my daughters to finish their sentence, I was telling them that I expected them to keep trying. Now, a spinal cord injury is impossible to predict, but after the motivation started, my insurance company kicked me out of Sheltering Arms just 3 weeks after the accident. It's an incredibly short time for a spinal cord patient. But the motivation and power that yet held made me want to continue to regain my strength and mobility as an outpatient at the UVA hospital. I wasn't successful in everything that I tried. This was the result of the first bicycle ride I tried to take after the accident. Linda wanted to wrap me in bubble wrap and sell my bike after that. But the motivation that yet held made me try again the next day and the day after that. When I was telling my daughters to finish their sentence, It was telling them that I expected them to keep trying, and eventually they and I would say, I can do it. It felt so good just 5 months after the accident when my friend Keith and I completed a 10-mile bike ride. Now, being on the bike at that time is probably the only place I felt almost completely normal in the way I moved. And that's still true today. Yet is motivation. Don't forget the yet. And they liked the bike picture. Yet is hope. Just a couple of months after the accident, I read an article in The Atlantic by Arthur C. Brooks, which was entitled, "The Difference Between Hope and Optimism." In it, Dr. Brooks calls an optimist one who expects things to turn out better regardless of the reality of the situation. Hope, he says, is something more active. Hope is a conviction that one can act to make things better in some way. And while immediately after the accident, I tried to perform all the tasks and exercises that my therapist gave me, even though I couldn't perform them yet, in the hope that it would create the full recovery that I had envisioned. Now, while I agree with Dr. Brooks' distinction between hope and optimism, I believe that you can't have hope without optimism. My dead battery? I now call myself a hope-timist. Dr. Yin's statement, for being so lucky, now I didn't even press it at that time. For being unlucky, you sure are lucky, turned out to be not just a statement of fact at the time, but it was a prophecy of things to come. So many things happened during the journey that many people would call coincidental, but I believe happened because of my optimism and hope. And yes, because I was very lucky. I was fortunate to have been taken of course it does work backwards and down here. I was fortunate to have been taken to a hospital where the neurosurgeon was conservative and did not perform surgery. That would have added weeks to my recovery. And we know from talking to other doctors that not every hospital, and possibly even not most hospitals, would have taken that approach. I was fortunate that Sheltering Arms, the newest and most advanced rehabilitation hospital in the country, was only an hour from my house, so that Linda could visit me every day and still live at home. And I was exceptionally fortunate to have been surrounded by medical care providers and therapists and technicians who were, without exception, professional, courteous, and caring. Now, I've realized that hope-timism is not an individual effort. You need to surround yourself with people who foster your hope. I was incredibly touched when as many of my therapists and technicians as could came by my room. It felt like my house after a month there. Came by my room to say goodbye. This group is just a small representation of the many people who worked with me and fostered my hope. I now want to provide hope-timism to others. My family and I have established the Hope-Timist Foundation, which is, our goal is to make adaptive sports more accessible for athletes and veterans who have suffered spinal cord injuries. If you would like more information about it, please email me, info@optimismfdn, that's foundation.com. So from your point of view, it probably looks as if I'm fully recovered. I assure you that's not the case. I've come to grips with the fact that I've probably played my last rugby game. But I was brought to tears just a few weeks ago when I couldn't run and kick a soccer ball with my two oldest grandsons. I was saying goodnight to the 4-year-old that night, and he looks up at me. He says, "Papa, practice makes you better. You need to practice so you can run with me." I'm not an optimist. I realize that I've probably suffered permanent nerve damage. But I am an optimist. I can envision running with my grandchildren. I know I have to practice, so I'm going to go do that. And all the while, I won't forget the yet. Thank you.